Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to try and regulate these two watches. If you watched my video a couple weeks ago on magnetism, you saw that I went through and rigorously tested with my Timegrapher in all positions a ton of watches, including these two, which are just about brand new, just worn a few times each, and they were significantly off, both in rate and beat error. So this one, the Pagani Design, is running significantly slow in all positions, and it has beat error in all positions. Now this Seiko is exactly the opposite. It's running fast and has beat error in all positions. So good candidates for what should be, hopefully, a relatively simple regulation. Now, I've read about it, I watched a ton of videos, and it wasn't until recently that it just clicked for me as to the whole concept, and it is so simple. It's funny, the more I get into watchmaking, the more similarities I see between engines and watches as far as building and tuning. This whole concept of regulation and working around the escapement, or the balance assembly more specifically, is to me very much like tuning a simple carburetor. And you'll see what I mean as we get in here. Now, I have not opened this Seiko up at all. Haven't even looked at the balance here to see what we have available. Oh, good. And we do have two types of endpoints there to adjust. That is what we want to see. Now, this guy here, at first I was thinking this was my Sujus, which is also Chinese, but a much better movement. And it looks like this one also has two. Hang on, let me put on my glasses. Oh, that's better. Yeah. All right, so we've got... Anyway, we want to see if we can get these as close to dialed in as possible. Now, as far as beat error, everywhere I read and look, it says anything below 1.0 isn't going to make a difference to the watch. So it seems to be more bragging rights to get that dialed in as close to 0.0 as possible. And once I get these open, I'll show you what I'm doing and why and exactly how it works. And hopefully you'll have a little aha moment if you've been wondering about it as well. Let's start with the Seiko here. Let me see, just memorize what hole this is on. Second from the inside. By the way, if you are using a strap with extra large holes like this is a Colareb. Absolutely love their straps. So pliable, so soft, extra thick. But I'm using it with a clasp, it happens to be the stock Seiko clasp, with a very small post. And if you just try to stick it in the Colareb hole, it falls out because it's so large it doesn't actually snap into place. It just floats around in there. What I did is I took some extra leather from one of the extra loops. I think it actually was off this watch here. I just cut the extra little leather off and snugged a piece of it down in there to make the hole smaller. And there you can see the post actually snaps into place. And now it's perfectly secure, just like it would be a small hole. So you just pop that out now. You can see how I smushed it in there, and you can't even see anything when it's on because it completely covers it. So quick little tip there. This is a screw back case, so we'll try the ball first. Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter. I was going to say I might want to measure it first, but makes no difference if this is on or not. Oh, and that is on there tight. So we'll go ahead and use our tool. There we go. So we've got the balance assembly here. It's just a spring that's vibrating back and forth, expanding and contracting. It's a spiral shaped spring, right? Starts in the middle and it's cinched down, locked in the center, spirals around, and then ends at one of these posts. Get my glasses back on here. So it ends at this post right here. I believe it was called the stud, and it's locked into place. So both ends of the spring are locked into place, and the rest of it is left to expand and contract. This other one over here nearby, it has two little studs or posts or rails, and that last coil is passing through it. And as it expands and contracts back and forth, this is moving a little bit as the whole thing is expanding back and forth between these two. It's basically a limiter. So as you change where this is by moving it back and forth and just slightly changing its orbit, basically, you're changing where it's going to bump into the spring as it contracts back and forth. So what they do by changing this end one here, which is what we're going to do first, it's kind of like adjusting the low circuit on a basic carb. You do this one first because it affects the second one, the high speed circuit. This first, the stud, the first one that we're going to adjust, controls the beat error. So you got the little part of the watch that's doing this, the tick-tock, right? The little piece moving back and forth. And it's hitting the escapement wheel, which is like a one-way clutch, and it's doing this. Well, on the other end, you got the other piece. It looks similar going back and forth, but you got the post moving it back and forth. What this does is adjust basically the center of rotation of this part. So if it's at rest and it's naturally centered, as this goes back and forth and moves the pallet fork, it's equal. That's a 0.0 beat error. It's hitting this side and this side evenly. Tick tock, right? Well, if this is rotated off center, so now all of a sudden it's doing this, it's hitting one side unevenly, more than the other. Or if it's rotated over here. See what I mean? That's beat error. Now, beat error on the machine just shows up as one's more than the other. It doesn't tell you which one is more than the other. Anything above 0.0 means this is rotated either this way or that way. So it's trial and error to see which way you adjust the stud. If you adjust it and it gets better, that was the right way. If you adjust it and it got worse, go the other way. So that's all it is. Beat error is just, is this whole spring assembly centered and equal in its intent? Now, it doesn't tell you if it's right or wrong. It can still be running fast, it can still be running slow, but it's running equally in both directions, fast or slow. So that's why we do that one first. We get the beat error as close to 0.0 as possible, and then we're good to go. And then after that, we tackle the other one. And that's where you've got the two posts and the springs basically hitting it. And this is adjusting the limiter, how big the spring can be allowed to be. If we move this in real close, it's going to be hitting this post, and it's going to limit how big the spring can expand. If we move it out further, it's not. You're going to have more space. So the spring gets bigger or smaller depending on where we move the other one here. That affects how fast or slow the whole mechanism works. So that's how you adjust the rate of the watch. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is stick this on the Timegrapher. We'll get a baseline. I'm gonna let it run for maybe 10 minutes or so to settle in. And as far as I know, you only do this in the dial down position. So you put it on the machine like this, and you only worry about one position. Maybe there are more accurate ways of doing it in different positions, but I'm just doing it like this. This is what I basically see everybody doing. All right, let's get a baseline. So in the case of the Seiko, we've got approximately 16 seconds fast, beat error in this position, 0.2, 0.3, kind of goes back and forth. So that's what we're starting with. Since it's a guessing game which way to move it for the beat error, I'm just going to nudge it ever so slightly towards the center, counterclockwise. It is very difficult to see this even with my readers on. I mean, it's in focus, but it's such a small, delicate thing that I'm not going to be super confident about how much I'm moving it. So it's definitely going to be a trial and error thing. I'm just going to feel it here. Okay, I'm making contact, and I don't know how much tension is on this. So I'm going to be very slow about the initial movement. Just see what it takes to move it. Okay, it's more than I thought. There we go. Okay, so that's not bad at all. So I barely bumped it. I mean, like maybe 1 degree. Let's stick it back on and see what that did. See if it was the right way at least. So as we can see, that was the wrong way. We went from 0.3 to 3.7, and that also tells me how tiny of a change makes a big difference. Boy, that's going to be tough to get into perfect spec without being able to see super, super close, but we'll try. And hopefully you also noticed there why I said do one before the other, because adjusting for the beat error directly affects the overall rate. So if you were to adjust your rate and dial it in and then do your beat error, well, guess what? You got to do your rate again, just like a carb with the high and the low speed circuits. So I'm going to very, very tinily bump this back towards me clockwise. Try to basically just go as far as I did before. And see what we get here. So that time was again in the right direction, which we knew, and wasn't quite enough. Try again. Now the reason I have no doubt a microscope would make this so much simpler is because I could see exactly where things are and get my bearings and have something to measure against when I'm moving this. I can't see any features of this whatsoever. I just see this little post and I see where the jewel is, but that's it. You know, I can't see any kind of lines or anything. But if I was, using like a 100x scope, that would be very easy and very quick to dial in. So let's go clockwise again. Let's see where that lies. All right, so we're real close to where we started, just a little tiny bit more. And nailed it. Okay, there we go. So now we can adjust the other one to get that rate as close to 0 or just slightly positive as possible. So this operates basically the same way. We have the little part here that we adjust, but here we have a plus and minus and somewhat of a gauge. And on the opposite end, there's just a little mark. Sometimes you'll see metal actually protruding like a needle on a gauge. Now, negative, we want to slow this down since we are over 20 seconds fast. So what we want to do is move it clockwise. That'll make the effective spring bigger, so it takes longer to do its expansion and contraction before it hits those bars and bounces back. So we're already almost to the edge here of where it's showing on the negative gauge, but we're just going to go a little tiny bit more. So knowing how sensitive now these types of adjustments are, and I have no idea how sensitive it is when doing this rate one, we're just going to move a tiny, tiny little bit and then give it a check. The good thing is adjusting this should not adjust the beat rate, so we shouldn't have to touch that again. And again, I don't know how much pressure this is going to need. It's actually bending the screwdriver a little bit just with the sideways motion. Oop, that jumped. That was not as smooth as the other one. It just gave way real quick, but we moved it just a tiny bit, a couple degrees. Let's stick it on, see what it did. And what I'm doing here is stopping it and starting it every time because this does do an average of readings. So I want each one to be fresh every time I make a change. Let's see, so that, I had a feeling that was gonna be way too much because of the way it jumped. So we went from 22 seconds fast to 32 seconds, 34 seconds slow. So definitely somewhere in the middle of where it jumped. Hopefully it's gonna be smoother to adjust now. Let's see how we did. Well, I don't know anybody that wouldn't be pleased with that result. Oh yeah, see, that's simple. If you have one of these machines, that is. Pretty quick. If I wasn't doing the video, this would have been a 5-minute procedure between taking the thing off your wrist and putting it back on. All right, let's tackle the other one. Now, likewise with this one, we want to take this off. Let's see, make sure I'm on the right one. Third from the end. Seems like every single watch I have has a different combination of what holds what, because the strap is different, the clasp is different, the watch is different. I get confused sometimes. Now in this one, if you watched, I don't think it was the last video, a couple of videos ago at least, this has 2 missing screws right here. And that's because they were both completely stripped out from the factory, just, you know, cheap Pagani Design. But that's okay, because I'm not taking this swimming or anything like that. Still got 2 in there, so it's good to wash your hands, get the rain. That's all I really care about. And this is the one I did the hands modification on, so you can actually read it. Yay! It does appear to be the same. Now we don't have the plus and minus on the little bridge part there, or the arm, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure there's a name for it, I just don't know. But that's okay, because number one, we know the direction that it needs to be for fast or slow from the other watch. But once you know the point of what you're doing, you don't need it anyway. Spring longer equals slower. So clockwise equals slower of the adjuster. That's all we need to know. And this one, this was running slow, so we need to speed it up. So we're going to be going the opposite way, but still has beat air, so we need to tackle that first. Let's throw it on and see where it's running. So this watch is a little perplexing, and I mentioned this in the previous video I did featuring it. It is very inconsistent. I'm getting weird results. I'm getting these scatters of noise or misreadings. It's going from 0 to -6 and different points in between. And the beat error appears and disappears. It's just not giving me consistent, even results. It doesn't seem to settle. Doesn't matter how long I let this thing sit. So I don't know what's causing it. I'm going to try and just put it in some different positions. Now I notice it's got a huge plastic spacer ring. My theory is that it's just not picking up to the microphone as cleanly as all the other watches, which don't have this kind of huge spacer. Basically, they stuck an old small movement in a huge fancy fashion case, right? So that's my theory, at least, that the signal isn't just coming through as evenly or cleanly. Maybe I can swap it around and get some better pulse on the metal part to the crown. I don't know. Let's give it a shot. It's got to be better than this. And I think that theory was now proven correct. I think I'm just getting much better mechanical impulse through the crown and stem to that metal piece. I think this is the actual main pickup for the microphone inside, or at least the part that's transferring to where the pickup is. This is the microphone, but I don't know where the actual transducer is. I know it's not anything to do with this spring-loaded shuttle. That's just a basic clamp, but this is the cutout they give you for most watches' crowns. But look at the difference. Look how much more action I'm getting just from changing that. Now the beat error is showing up more consistently, and the rate isn't bouncing around nearly as much. Now we're pretty steady at -6. And this is what I was getting last time. I had forgotten that I had flipped this around last time because I figured out the same thing. Yep. So using my loop here, man, I can really, I don't know which one this is. It's pretty intense. I'm gonna guess it's my 10. I'll have to actually mark them so I can tell in the future, but man, you really see the details. You just have to get within a couple inches of it. Obviously, you can watch some other videos from the guys that are using the really cool microscope cameras, but this is what I'm dealing with. So I'm just gonna touch it. Again, I don't know how much tension there is. Oh man, that feels light. I think it moved already, just barely breathing on it. All right, let's see what we get. And that was too far, so we're gonna come back the other way. And the final result? Yep, I'll take that. So hopefully you can see how really easy it is to regulate your watch, at least with this type of movement. I know there are lots of other types of movements out there, and some, I'm sure, are not so easy to do. Let's see which screw holes were good. This one here and the opposite. But if you got something like this, as long as you have the Timegrapher, which is very inexpensive, links down below if you want to pick one up. Insanely useful, I have to say. I mean, I loved it just because it was fun to spend a night with my watches just to see where they all are. Go through them, test them out in all the different positions, see if I had any kind of issue. I never really would have known that these two, especially the Seiko, which I care more about, were so far off. And man, it is super easy just to do your own little adjustments here and there and get them so much better than as delivered. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that, right? Bada bing, bada boom. Now I got 2 more watches, really dialed in, and I can have fun with. That's it. See you guys next time.